Hey, this is Tom from MVP Chess. Welcome back to my series on Bobby Fischer's seminal work, My 60 Memorable Games. In this video, we'll be analyzing game number 16 that Fischer played versus Petrosian in the Candidates Tournament 1959. You're not going to want to miss 4 queens on the board at the same time. Before we jump into the analysis, don't forget to smash that subscribe button and join Team MVP. Thanks so much for your support. All right, let's jump in. I know a lot of you have been waiting for this game. It's a good one. E4, C6. So Fischer, of course, with the white pieces, plays best by test. And Petrosian goes for the Caro-Kann. Petrosian was a super solid player. So the Caro-Kann suited him really well. Knight C3, D5, and Knight F3. So Fischer goes for the 2 knights attack. Earlier in his career, this is something he preferred. The basic idea of the 2 knights attack, and this is something I actually learned through Fischer's notations. I never really appreciated the strategic reasoning behind it. But it's to specifically prevent black from playing the classic Caro-Kann move, bishop f5. So if we have a capture similar to the classical variation or the Capablanca variation, as it's sometimes called, you'll notice that the difference in this variation is that black hasn't established a knight on d7 yet. So this knight jump to e5 is really annoying to deal with. And white can get an absolutely massive initiative after queen h5, g6, and then an awesome move, bishop c4. Great move. Of course, if black were to take the queen here, bishop takes f7 as mate. So black would be forced to play e6, and then after something like queen e2, white's just got basically a winning position out of the opening. So that's basically the idea of the 2 knights attack. So if you're looking for a system against the Caro-Kann, I know that's a very popular opening nowadays. I don't believe in it, but I know Levy does, so a lot of people play it. This could be a good one to explore, the 2 knights attack like Fischer liked to play. So that's why in this position, Petrosian played bishop g4. And then after h3, bishop takes f3. I mean, this is why I don't teach the Caro-Kann to my students. Okay, I mean, I know it's super solid. I know there's less theory, but as early as move 5, black is just ceding the bishop pair to white. Knight f6, d3. Fischer prepares to develop his dark squared bishop. e6. Okay, so now that the light squared bishop has been exchanged, Petrosian can put all his pawns on light squares and adopt this super solid pyramid triangle formation. Fischer decides to play g3 to fianchetto the bishop. We have bishop e4. Okay, pinning the knight, looking to put pressure on e4, also menacing d4. So that's why Fischer plays bishop d2. We have d4 anyway, and Fischer just drops the knight back to b1 so that the knight can recapture on d2. e5, bishop g2, and c5. So Petrosian's been able to get a lot of central control, also establish a space advantage with this far advanced pawn on d4. But notice, and I've indicated it here with the arrows, that it's taken him 4 tempi to get the pawns to e5 and c5. Of course, he played c6 on move 1 and then also played e6. So it's been a slow plan, and because of that, he's lagging a bit behind in development. So Fischer castles to the king side, knight c6, queen e2. Okay, in this structure, notice Fischer's pawn chain is pointing towards the king side. So his natural power move in the position, the pawn break he should be looking to play, is f4. So that's why he moved the queen to e2, out of the way of the f pawn. Petrosian plays queen e7, staying flexible. And we have f4 and castles queenside. So you might think this is a little unusual for someone like Petrosian with a super solid prophylactic style to castle queenside, but very often in these Caro structures, not the advanced variation necessarily, but against the two knights, against the classical variation, it's pretty common for the king to castle to the queen side. It's actually pretty safe there. But still, we have an opposite sides castling position, so that's why with his next move, Fischer plays a3, looking to play pawn to b4, starting a queenside pawn storm, trying to open lines to attack the king. Petrosian drops the knight back to e8. Similar to how Fischer played queen e2 to get out of the f-pawn's way, this is kind of a clearance move, looking to potentially reroute the knight to the queen side and solidify the structure with pawn to f6. So that's the idea behind knight e8. Fischer presses on the queen side, pawn to b4. Petrosian captures, and then Fischer plays knight c4, which he criticized. He said that this gives black some time to consolidate a little bit in the center of the board. He said best here was to capture on e5 first, so that black couldn't play f6 and then recapture with the pawn. So by playing knight c4 first, Petrosian had time to play f6 and open the f-file and also consolidate his central pawn structure. So Fischer was pretty critical of himself for not grabbing on e5 first. Fischer takes on b4, and notice Petrosian's really instructive play in this position. He plays knight c7. No way does he want to grab this pawn on b4. Okay, and I know a lot of you guys would probably do this in your games. That's exactly what white wants. White doesn't care about this pawn. White would love to just toss it off the board so that white could have open lines and open files for the rooks to attack the king. So Petrosian realizes that this pawn on b4, he's almost using it as a shield, to slow down Fischer's attack and keep the queen side closed. Knight a5, and then another really great move from Petrosian, knight b5. And Fischer admits after this move that he says in the annotations that I knew I'd been outplayed here. So after a capture here, we can see what Petrosian's been able to accomplish here, and it's really quite impressive. He's got this blockading knight on b5. That's just defending everything. It's defending h7 in combination with the pawn on d4. It's preventing this pawn on c2 from moving and challenging the knight. It's blockading this pawn on b4. It's just an amazing piece. And with the bishop all the way over here, there's really no way to challenge this knight. So Petrosian's managed to completely squash Fischer's initiative on the queen side. But as we'll see, Petrosian's play starts to become very risky and very uncharacteristic of his play. After rook f2, g6, Fischer starts advancing on the king side, king b7, h5. It was in this position that Fischer was really surprised by Petrosian's next move, as was I. I was really anticipating Petrosian here just to play rook hf8. Start trading off the heavy pieces and try to simplify into an endgame where I think black would just stand strategically better. But instead, Petrosian captures the pawn on b4. Wow. This is really risky play, okay? Not only opening the b-file, but now the queen has vacated the 7th rank, which allows Fischer to bring the rook into f7 with check. So Petrosian's position went from super solid. He had this just amazing blockade on the queen side. His king was completely safe. He was on the verge of just playing rook hf8 and simplifying into a better endgame. Totally in his style. He would have been totally in his element. Instead, he takes on b4 and just allows all of this counterplay from Fischer. So, I mean, we're thankful for it because it allowed the 4-queen game to come to fruition, but very, very surprising play by Petrosian. So queen f2, a5. Okay, again, very risky play from Petrosian. Pushing this pawn in front of the king, potentially weakening the queen side a little bit more. Nice move by Fischer here, pawn to c4, okay, exploiting this pin on the d-pawn. So Petrosian cannot take en passant because this pawn on d4 is pinned, which forces the knight to move. Now, Petrosian jumped into c4. Fischer said it would have been much better in this position for black to play knight d6. Okay, Fischer said with knight c4, Petrosian really wasn't sensing the danger in the position. And it was in this position that Fischer lost the thread a little bit. He played rook f1, which he heavily criticized. He said much better would have been to jump in with the queen immediately. Queen to f6. And we see this interesting line. If black challenges Fischer on the f-file, Fischer could take this pawn. Okay, notice this rook is en prise in the corner after this capture. And after queen c5, e5, Fischer's got really good counterplay with this passed e-pawn, and also the fact that the king is relatively unsafe. So he thought that this would have been a much better continuation. But instead he played rook f1, a4, and then got his queen to f6. So Petrosian, again, could have played a more prophylactic move, like perhaps bringing the queen back in defense to prevent queen to f6. But he decided to push on there instead. Queen c5, and then I will turn it over to you in this position. Okay, it's not necessarily the best move, but Fischer found a really nice way in this position to win a pawn and put Petrosian on the back foot. Certainly give him some concrete problems to solve. So I'll turn it over to you. White to play in this position. How did Fischer win a pawn? Pause your videos. Okay, congratulations if you found the nice move, rook takes h7. Okay, with the tactical point being in this position, of course, if rook takes, queen takes d8, and now this comes with check, and the black king would be toast. Okay, so Petrosian, of course, appreciates that and plays rook df8, which allows Fischer to grab on g6. So Fischer's up a pawn here. Okay, and now this passed h-pawn is free to run up the board and promote. But Petrosian in this position was really banking on the speed of his passed a-pawn. Of course, Fischer also has his own passed pawn on h5. So after h6, a2, I think you can see where this is going. Queen g8, making way for the pawn. Petrosian promotes to a queen, and so does Fischer. So we have 4 queens on the board. A mental position, but one where, although, now I don't like to use the computer, but I'll just let you guys know because you're probably really curious in this position. Believe it or not, the computer is reading triple zeros. This is why I don't use the computer, because that's a totally impractical evaluation for a human. This position is totally mental. Anything can happen. It's extremely complicated. And I would say among mere mortals, we're getting some sort of decisive result from this position. So how to evaluate it in terms of human play? Well, I look at the relative safety of the kings, and I think Fischer's king just stands a little bit better in this position. So that's why Fischer assessed after Queen A7, G4, that he thought this was it. He really thought that he was starting to kind of close in for the kill. And the nice thing is he's got play kind of on both boards, both sides of the board. You know, he's got this passed pawn that's pretty easy to advance, plus play against the weakened king. But credit to Petrosian in this position for finding an absolutely ingenious defense. And I will give you a chance to solve it on your own, okay? What should black do with the king in this position? This is the main problem that Petrosian has to solve. As I mentioned before, Fischer's king is safer, okay? Not only because this bishop's around, the queens provide some defense, but it's just difficult right now for black, given the central pawn structure, to get the queens over to the king side and attack. So Petrosian's king is the one that's mortally in danger. What do you do with the king? Pause your videos and try to think of Petrosian's ingenious defensive move in this position. So no worries if you didn't find the right idea in this position. It's really, really difficult. But Petrosian realized, almost counterintuitively, that black's king will actually be safer in white's half of the board, using this cluster of pawns as a shield. Okay, so that's why in this position he played king c5. And look where Petrosian brings the king over the next several moves. Okay, we have queen f8. Petrosian blocks. Fischer, of course, keeps his second queen on the board. He's the one that's attacking. King b4. And after queen h2, I mean, it looks like black's king is done for. He has an only move in this position, king b3. Wow. Absolutely amazing. That's why way back when, okay, in this position, the computer reading triple zeros is just not helpful. Okay, if you can find this idea of marching the king into white's half of the board, credit to you. But I mean, that's very difficult to assess in this position. Okay, that's why I thought white just stand in practical terms is so much better. But Fischer says in his annotations, and I think this is a great description of Petrosian's play, that Petrosian was slippery as an eel. That's a great description of his play. Look at this king on b3. But it's actually quite safe. After queen a1, Fischer is threatening queen b2 checkmate. Again, Petrosian has an only move, queen a3. And a pair of queens come off the board. Okay, so the position is simplified a little bit. But white still looks to be in the driver's seat here. Queen h6, good move. So now Fischer is pivoting from an all-out attack on the king to trying to promote this g-pawn. Okay, and notice the king staved off mate, but it is way over on the other side of the board, relatively inactive and out of play. So Fischer's going to look to exploit that. But credit to Petrosian for finding queen f7, king g2, king b3. Okay, he's trying to centralize his king and get some counterplay. Fischer dismissed in this position. Now, I won't really go into this line in depth, but he dismissed this move saying knight d1 was best. Modern engines don't really agree with his assessment. Apparently, Fischer's okay after queen c5. He actually has a draw. But I really think Fischer was still in a winning mindset here. So he's looking to promote this pawn, basically. king b3, queen d2. Nice move by Fischer. Okay, getting the queen kind of into the danger zone and preventing the king from really getting any activity. Queen h7, king g3. Okay, look at the relative activity of the kings. Fischer's king stands a little bit better, so he's still looking to escort this pawn. But in this position, Fischer had missed a critical tactic. Okay, after king g3, Black's got a nice saving move in this position. So I will turn it over to you for the final time. Black to play. What tactic did Petrosian find in this position to equalize the game? Pause your videos. So congratulations if you spotted the potential of a knight fork here on e4 and you found the awesome move queen takes e4. Okay, with the justification being that if white were to take back, knight takes e4 and black is winning this position, believe it or not. So Fischer admits in the annotations that he was a bit shaken by this move, which led him to play the inferior queen f2. But after queen h1, Fischer offered Petrosian a draw, and he accepted. Now, Fischer admits that he was scared that Petrosian wouldn't accept because Black in this position is objectively better. Okay, so the game ended in a draw here by agreement, but let's just play on a couple more moves, okay? Just the natural plans in both players' positions. Of course, Fischer has been trying to push this g-pawn for some time, so it's only natural to play g5 here. But we see after e4, this is a really big problem for Fischer to deal with, okay, this pawn advance e4. He can't capture here because of knight takes e4, and Black is just winning, okay? So Petrosian would be getting a lot of counterplay in the center of the board with his e-pawn. Petrosian's queen is also buzzing around Fischer's king. So Petrosian would definitely have some work to do, but he definitely stands better. But psychologically, and this has happened to myself, and I'm sure many of you, you've been worse almost the whole game, and you've been kind of groveling for a draw. And once you equalize the position, it's very difficult for you to readjust your frame of mind and play for a win. So I think after you found queen takes e4 in this position, Petrosian was probably just really relieved and was very content just signing the score sheets, taking the half point, and fighting another day, and just couldn't recalibrate and say, you know what, I'm actually better in this position, I'm going to play on. Very difficult to do. Okay, it actually happened to me in an over-the-board game earlier this month where I was worse for a lot of the game. I managed to claw my way back, and in the final position, I actually offered my opponent a draw, which he accepted when, in fact, I was really much better and definitely should have pressed on. I think it could have still ended in a draw, but I could have definitely played on for a win, but just like Petrosian, it was very difficult for me after a really long game, and I'm sure this was a long game for them because there was an adjournment. My game was long too. I think at that point I had been playing for almost 5 hours. It's just really hard to just change your frame of mind and say, okay, I'm going to press on for another half an hour, and try to play for the win. You're just kind of relieved that you didn't lose and you could salvage a half point. So totally understandable by Petrosian. So this was the 4-queen game. I really hope you enjoyed it. Perplexing play by Petrosian for sure. I mean, if we go back to this position, let me try to find it. Petrosian is just in the driver's seat here. Queenside blockade, just absolutely perfect positional play to squash Fischer's queenside initiative in this opposite side's castling position. He should have played rook hf8 here and just played on in his endgame. That would have been totally true to his style, but instead he played very risky, which is so uncharacteristic for his style. But, of course, we're all glad he did because it led to a really famous game where 4 queens were on the board, which I hope you enjoyed. So, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. Be sure to join Team MVP and turn on your notifications. You're not going to want to miss the next installment of the series, which is game number 17. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.